starting with the Chicago Bears. A lot of excitement for Chicago here, Sam. We got Caleb Williams in the building. It's a whole new world for the Bears heading into 2024. We're going to talk a little best case, worst case scenario, but it already starts with a lot of optimism with Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall draft pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you bring in a new quarterback who's the new face of the franchise, like there's a whole sort of wave of optimism and excitement for a team that surrounds that. I think it's extra for a team like Chicago, who, you know, one of the NFL's most storied franchises, an original, an OG, an actual founder of the league. They've basically never had a quarterback, right? So not only are you potentially bringing in a complete difference maker, a guy that's going to change the fortunes of the franchise, a number 1 overall pick, but he might be the only good quarterback you've ever had, right? Certainly in the modern era. Let's not forget about old Sid Luckman back in the day. But for modern football, when people pass the ball forward with any kind of regularity, the Bears have never had a good one, right? So Caleb Williams can come in, and if he is who they think he is, he could not just transform this team, not just propel them to somewhere different, but literally take them to somewhere that they've never been before. And I don't mean to a Super Bowl. Obviously, Rex Grossman achieved that. But I mean, actually, like, be a reason that this team is going to be contending year in, year out. Be a passing offense that can actually carry the team and just completely transform everything that we think of and associate with, the Bears, with Chicago football, with, 85 Bears in December football, cold weather games, defense. It could all change if Caleb Williams is the guy they think he is.
Yeah, so this isn't crowning him or anything like that, but boy, does he have all the tools, right? He has the tools to win within the pocket, the arm strength, the accuracy. He's got the outside the pocket magic and the natural playmaking and feel. He can scramble. He has all the tools to win in all the ways that you want your quarterback to win in today's NFL. Now it's about putting it all together. And I think what Ryan Poles has done as the general manager from a team building effort, remember when he took over a few years ago, it was a team that did not have a ton of talent. The talent had just slowly dropped off from, there was that 2018 season, right? Years ago now, where they had an excellent defense and they had really good pieces on both sides of the ball. The roster had just gotten worse and worse. Ryan Poles has gotten them out of a bad cap situation, in a situation where they didn't have young talent to lean upon. Now we're talking about a rebuilt offensive line that I think will be good enough. And look at this group of playmakers. DJ Moore, who came over in the Panthers trade last year. They bring in Keenan Allen for almost nothing from the Chargers. Even though he's getting older, he's going to be a key piece for Caleb Williams. Just a nice, possession type of outlet. And then they get Rome Odunze, right? It's not just Caleb Williams, but they get Rome Odunze, a guy that could have been the number 1 receiver probably in this upcoming draft class, would probably be the number 1, but because he was with Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., he was the 3rd receiver off the board at number 9 overall. So it's not just Caleb Williams' excitement. I mean, this entire roster has been reshaped favorably for the Bears over the last couple of years.
And don't forget, Hall of Fame superstar Colin Johnson still on the roster. Preseason Hall of Fame game, Calvin Johnson is out there as well. I'm just saying, it's let's not
disclaimer.
Let's
as of record time, Colin Johnson is on the roster and has yet to be cut.
He might
Very risky, Sam. Very risky, Sam. Mentioning Colin
right,
Johnson in a season preview.
That receiving core is potentially a total difference maker, because most quarterbacks, most number 1 overall pick type quarterbacks, do not step into this kind of situation. Most of them are in situations that are going to hinder their immediate success, not enhance it. Whereas Caleb Williams steps into this team, and there might not be a better trio of wide receivers in the NFL for him to throw to if that group plays the way they look like they could. And Williams, it's important to kind of understand, he was getting these comparisons to Mahomes and to Aaron Rodgers, and they weren't crazy. Now, it might be unrealistic. It might be too far. It might be setting, a sort of unfair bar for him to try and clear. But those are the natural names for you to gravitate to when you're trying to describe what Caleb Williams was like in college. And already in just one preseason game of action, essentially, we are seeing Caleb Williams flash that kind of ability and that kind of talent. And if that is what it's going to be, if he's going to hit the ground running, if he's not going to make a ton of mistakes, and he's going to play at that kind of level in the NFL, it's the kind of thing that can instantly transform a franchise.
And when you look at the way those playmakers fit together, I think DJ Moore and Rome Odunze playing on the outside. Keenan Allen, again, at this point in his career, is he going to be, stretching the field or defeating man coverage? Probably not, but there's going to be certain games where Caleb Williams just has to read it out, find the open man against zone. Keenan Allen's going to get open and be that outlet underneath. You have Gerald Everett as an athletic tight end, Cole Kmet as a good solid all-around tight end, and then DeAndre Swift now coming out of the backfield with his big playability. There's a lot of potential on this Bears offense. Offensive line, again, I think they were probably blamed a little bit too much for what happened with Justin Fields and the sacks that he took. We know that the quarterback is largely responsible for not only sacks, but often pressure. And Justin Fields held the ball so long, it probably made the offensive line look worse than they were. I think it does have that mid-tier type of ability. Tevin Jenkins probably the best player on that team. On that line, Braxton Jones was outstanding as a fifth-round rookie in 2022. He has a lot of ability. First-round pick Darnell Wright. So again, I think top to bottom in this offense has the pieces, and it is completely different. To be fair to Justin Fields, when Fields came in to the Bears 3 years ago, we said, oh, he doesn't have any of this stuff. The line was bad his first year. The playmakers weren't there. Caleb Williams is also stepping into probably the best offensive situation that the Bears have had in probably a decade.
Yeah, I think you're right that the difference between Justin Fields and Caleb Williams is going to impact the offensive line. I think the other thing that is going to impact the offensive line that isn't talked about is that receiving group that we talked about. Don't underestimate the impact that a group of receivers can have on how the offensive line looks. Remember when was it 2019 where Brady, the sort of first year where Brady basically had nobody to throw to, right? And immediately that offensive line in New England started to look terrible. It was basically the same group as before, but suddenly it started to look abysmal because there's nobody open and Brady can't get rid of the ball the way he normally does. And even when pressure arrives, he doesn't have anybody getting open that he can trust with. So the pressure looks worse because he's taking sacks now that he wouldn't previously. Now that group includes DJ Moore and Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen, the ball should be out quicker. He should have more options and more outlets when pressure does arrive. So I think those two things, the change in quarterback and the change in receiver, the upgrade in receiver, should make even the same personnel group up front look dramatically better.
On the defensive side of the ball, Sam, as we've talked about the Bears and their rebuild over the last couple of years and how it felt like the last piece that they needed to attack was the defensive line, right? And they started to do that in the middle of last year. They traded for Montez Sweat. He was a pending free agent. Traded a second rounder for him, and then locked him up for $24.5 million a year. I thought Montez Sweat for the last few years has been one of the more underrated defensive linemen in the league. He was pretty good down the stretch for the Bears, but more importantly, the defense as a whole played a lot better. And they've got some potential. I think there's still some questions. I don't think you just want to look at last year's first and second half splits and say, hey, they turned the corner once Montez Sweat got there. That's what they are. I think there's still questions rushing the passer. But when you look at the pieces in the back seven, last year they brought in TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds to play linebacker. Jalen Johnson's coming off of his best season. He just got paid. He is one of the best corners in the NFL.
Yeah, it's a group where it feels like they've relied on that potential. They've lent on the young players. They've lent on these guys, Tyreek Stevenson in particular, Gervon Dexter up front in particular. These young guys that showed something, that flashed maybe as rookies, and they really want those guys to be the answer at those positions, which may be true. Maybe those guys will pan out and become the players that they were expected to. But Gervon Dexter in particular was still sort of hit and miss as a rookie. Tyreek Stevenson, I was actually impressed by, even as somebody that didn't love him as a prospect coming out. But I think overall that defense was overachieving last season relative to the talent, the personnel that they had. Can they continue that? Or is it a sort of group that's primed to actually take a little bit of a step backward and maybe regress a touch in this season?
Yeah, so I'm intrigued to see if they can do that, right? I mean, they've done this by in 2023 stocking up on a whole bunch of draft picks, trying to double up at defensive tackle with Dexter, with Zach Pickens. Last year, only 5 draft picks, so they've they've added to this team in different ways, right? Through the draft, through free agency, through those trades with Keenan Allen. Will the defense be good enough? Because again, I don't know how quickly the offense puts it together. I think they have a chance to do it right away, though. I mean, I think Caleb Williams is that special. I think the offense has a chance to put it together quickly. And if the defense is just middle of the pack, we're talking about a really dangerous Bears team. So we've been trying to paint this best case scenario and worst case scenario for each team. Best case for me, Caleb Williams is as advertised. These playmakers as advertised. The offensive line's good enough. It's an explosive Bears offense and a good enough defense that all of a sudden they're contending in, again, a deep NFC North. We're going to go through each of these teams. They all have a lot of positives heading into the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best case scenario for the Bears is Caleb Williams is legitimately transformational, and this is a playoff team. Like, not just a team that could surprise some people, that could take a step forward from a year ago, that actually the Bears, with that offense, are able to scare people, and this team sneaks into the playoffs. Maybe I think everyone still expects the Detroit Lions, we'll get to them in a bit, to be the best team in that division, to win it. But the Bears could take a wild card spot and make the postseason.
Bears fans have had a lot of worst case scenarios over the last few years. Do we even paint that picture for them, or should we just skew positive for the Bears?
I mean, look, this is what we're doing is best case. Look, we can say the best case is more likely than the worst case, but we have to give the worst case.
So if there were negatives for Caleb Williams, right? He's the quote generational prospect. We have one of those every 3 or 4 years.
Right.
Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck. He was the slam dunk #1 overall. The weaknesses at USC, we know that the end of his career wasn't nearly as effective as the beginning of Caleb Williams' career. We know he struggled a little bit as the O-line struggled at USC, as he started to face pressure, started to force passes, started to try to do too much in the pocket. I would say the worst case scenario, remember we've talked about Baker Mayfield, and when he felt like the offensive line wasn't strong in front of him, he started to just play outside of structure and ad-lib too much, and like the fragility of the young quarterback. If we're going to paint a worst case scenario, I think that would be the way Caleb Williams doesn't live up to the hype, right? If he is under pressure a lot early, if he starts to try to do too much, tries to play hero ball too much, that leads to turnovers, and it actually hinders his development, right? Just talking this year, forget wins and losses. If his development is hindered because of pass protection issues or whatever it might be, that's part of it. And then just the defense, right? Like on paper, the names on defense are okay. So that means, you could land as one of the bottom 5 or 10 defenses in the NFL. So I think that's all in the range of outcomes for the Bears, even if it is less likely.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the worst case scenario involves Caleb Williams not be looking more like last year's version of Caleb Williams, where he's still capable of special, but he tries to do too much too often, causes too many turnovers by trying to play hero ball the whole time. Maybe his play style actually doesn't improve on Justin Fields relative to the impact it has on the offensive line. And generally, it's just not this transformational jump forward that it has the potential to be.
Also trying to highlight a key player or unit for each team. Where would you go for the Bears?
I mean, obviously, Caleb Williams is the key player for this team, but if you're
Agreed.
looking beyond the obvious quarterback that the correct answer is, you could focus on the offensive line. I think that whole dynamic we talked about is going to be interesting to see. Other than that, it might be Gervon Dexter, who we talked about, the big defensive tackle, who, was an inconsistent player in college, was inconsistent as a rookie, but is young, is talented, is physically gifted. And I feel like they're relying on him quite a lot to actually be a difference maker in the middle, with Montez Sweat being the sort of main source of pressure on the edge.
I was going to go with Dexter and really the D-line as a whole. I think it's if that line, I mean, if Dexter lives up to the second round hype, they liked him a lot coming out. He wasn't a very productive college player at Florida, but former 5-star that they were trying to, get the most of in a different scheme where they can let him attack the quarterback a little bit more. You also have early preseason good returns from an Austin Booker, a 5th round pick who probably could have played himself into the first round discussion if he went back to Kansas because of his tools, his length. And again, it's early, but preseason looks pretty good getting after the quarterback. So I think there are some of those, the young draft picks, recent draft picks for Ryan Poles on that defensive line. I'm not saying it's going to make or break the season, but it's going to determine a lot, I think, on that defensive side of the ball, with Montez Sweat, as you mentioned, being the key, the stable piece that they have there.
The only other player I think that would be worth a shout would be Jalen Johnson, the corner who had career year last season, arguably the best corner in the NFL in 2023. They pay him off the back of that. We know cornerback play is just wildly volatile year to year. Can he back that up? Can he repeat the year that he had last season or anything like it? Or is he going to sort of take a step back and suddenly the defense is different because you no longer have this guy playing like one of the best corners in the NFL?
All right, man. Anything else on the Bears before we move on to the Lions?
No, I mean, I think a lot of buzz and excitement about Chicago, and there should be. Caleb Williams looks just incredible player and going to be incredibly exciting to watch.